Welcome to Laugh, Cry, or Die, a comedy disability podcast hosted by me, Steve Wilbury, and Naomi Strain.
Hello.
We're both terrible at being alive, and we chat about it, sometimes alone, sometimes with people, sometimes with no clothes on, but you can't see that because it's a podcast.
Yeah, I have no clothes on right now, Julie.
And I can't see it anyway. So there's the first thing to be grateful for. Things that blind woman no longer has to worry about.
But it's such a wonderful sight. You're missing out on that.
Is it though? I mean, wonder applies to many things, including whatever it is I'm seeing now.
My old naked rubbish form.
I'm wondering why I still have to see. Julie, how can I become blind like you?
You should tell us. You should tell us who we've got with us today.
So our guest in our third seat is Julie Woods, also known as That Blind Woman.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Naomi. And I was going to say that I often tell everybody I speak to that it's a great time to be blind. So there you go. You could jump on board.
You're right now is great as long as Naomi puts her clothes back. So horrific.
Why do you say it's a great time to be blind?
Technology, Naomi, really, which has given us so much. When I went blind in 1997, I had a talking book machine that was like a 4-track cassette tape machine that you had to send the books back to the Foundation for the Blind, and you flip the mailing label over, and if you didn't flip it over, that they got sent back to yourself.
Right.
That's what happened 26 years ago. But now we have, I listen to talking books on a smart speaker in the corner of my bedroom by voice command. I have a cell phone in my handbag that speaks to me that's as powerful as any computer I worked on in the 1980s or 90s. It's great.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Come on, everybody.
Get on.
Get on that blind wagon.
Yeah, be blind, be happy.
Well, I guess the more people that were blind, the more money would be put into developing cool software. So,
if more people were blind in 97, they would have invented eyeballs.
Invented eyeballs.
Oh, eyeballs.
Plug-in eyeballs, not just random eyeballs
like
floating in jars.
USB rechargeable eyeballs.
Yeah, well, though that would be just another thing to recharge with your phone and your cigarettes. Is the future that great?
Yeah, true.
But that's based on the premise, Steve, that blind people want to be able to see.
Oh, snap. Totally ableist on my
part. Exactly.
That's a very good point.
That is a good point.
I have a 7-word story about my vision loss journey, which might lead us to the question that you're about to ask me, Steve. Let me share it with you first. It is sighted, partially sighted, blind, happy, sad, happy.
I like that. I like that. Good. That's almost like the emoji story of your journey, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Short and snappy.
Yeah, I like
2023.
And you when you lost your vision, did you have any warning that it was coming? Did you know that you were at risk, or was it just like, oh shit?
Well, it was a bit shit like that. Yes, it was. And just going back to that story, I was born sighted. I became partially sighted at the age of 18 due to a condition called Stargardt's disease, and that left me with loss of central vision. So life became blurry at 18, which I was for 13 years. And then when I was 31, I developed inflammation of the retina, and that was when I noticed that the vinyl in our bathroom was shimmering, the new vinyl that we'd laid down. And I said to my husband at the time, is that vinyl shimmering to you? And he said, no, it's not. It's like, oh, I better go and get my eyes checked. And as a result, 3 months later, I was left with legal blindness. And what that means is I could see moving shapes and high contrasting shadows.
And so at the moment you can see shadows?
No, I can see nothing at the moment, Naomi. In 2008, I haven't got to the next bit of the story. 2008, I lost the rest of my vision due to uveitis, which is inflammation at the front of the eye.
Right.
So it's totally black now.
Totally white. actually.
Totally white.
I was going
Yeah.
to ask what color is it? Because that's one thing. It's
Yes.
like a preconception that it's darkness.
Yes, exactly. But it's like driving through freezing fog with your lights off.
Right.
You can't sort of see past it.
I would say that's perfect zombie weather.
Yeah, exactly.
So the real question is, how many wooden bats with nails in them do you own, Julie?
For the apocalypse.
For the zombies.
I don't, wow. Do you think I should put that on my list for Santa?
Yeah, yeah, zombie survival gear.
If anyone's listening that would like to send Julie a zombie survival kit.
I might think it's the most violent book I've ever read.
This braille is really aggressive.
Yeah, it is.
It's one thing I was going to ask that one of my thoughts about if I was to go blind or with any sensory loss is I feel that I'd be really paranoid about not knowing what was around me or if people were pulling faces behind my, that kind of thing. Did you ever have that?
You do. You sort of learn to go with it, Naomi. It's a really good point. You have to relax into it and forget what's around you in terms of things that might scare you.
Right.
Yeah, because otherwise you would live in that state constantly, and that's not a good place to be. I can tell sometimes, my husband is rolling his eyes. I know when he's doing that. You kind of develop this thing where you know that people are pulling faces or communicating non-verbally to sort of bypass you.
Do you reckon that's just because you are awesome at doing that, or do you reckon that's because of your blindness being able to pick that up more?
I think you do develop a sense of something else is going on that you're not quite sure, but it's there, and it's sort of going on your instincts, really, I guess. Yeah.
I can actually hear when my wife is thinking at me really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I can too.
Not
your wife.
It's mostly thoughts of why did I marry this thing? What have I
That's
done?
what Rachel thinks about you.
Most of the time, yeah. That's what's rolling through her head is I've made a terrible mistake.
Well, she doesn't just think it, she tells the rest of us. These chats we have behind your back, the group message that's just slagging Steve off.
And the t-shirts that say my husband is a useless twat. I'm getting a bit of a sense that she's trying to tell me something.
It was the march through the Santa parade with all our t-shirts and the banner with Steve as a twat. People must know.
You got the hint.
Throwing out candy to the children with Steve as a twat written on all the little bits of candy. Mommy, who's Steve? I don't know, but he's a twat. So that one of the things that we talk about on our podcast a lot is the journey from like the life that you were supposed to have to the life that you now have. And like obviously going partially sighted at 18, that was a pretty big shift, but were you still able to you're like, okay, well, I'm partially sighted, but I can still do the thing that was in my head when I was a kid. I can still be that kind of successful, quote unquote, normal person.
Yes, but with a lot of pressure, of course, because with an undisclosed impairment and going to university and beginning the lectures in the back row and ending up in the front row, and just carrying that all around and finding it difficult to share my impairment. I think that's the bit that I found the hardest, Steve, despite completing my degree and then going to Wellington and working for the Ministry of Education. That I don't think impacted or disrupted my life quite as much as the legal blindness when I was 31.
So, but you were, but you didn't feel that you could share that you had a vision impairment. You were just like, I'm a normal university student. Everything's fine. La, 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 la.
Yeah, well, there's that whole, I'm 20, I want to be like everybody else. And then when you do share it, people don't get it. People don't get partial sight. They get total blindness and they get sightedness. Things in the middle are all a bit unusual and a bit hard for them to grasp. And they often would say, why don't you get glasses? That was the most common question I get. Well, it's like, okay, that's a good idea. I found it easier not to talk about it And then when I went blind and I met a whole lot of other people who were now like me, or I was now like them, then I just felt totally comfortable because it was okay not to see. They were doing the things I thought I couldn't, and they really inspired me to do the things that I thought I couldn't. I was trapped in this body that wouldn't work the way I wanted it to. I just wanted to be able to see what I used to be able to see, even though it was only partial sight, so that I could go about and do my everyday things in the way that I always had, but I wasn't able to do that anymore. I had to learn how to receive information through my fingers, nose, mouth, and toes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So do you think, just random, would it be easier to go instantly blind from fully sighted? Because then that's thrust upon you, whereas you had to get used to each stage.
I do think there's a grief in that
Yeah,
constant
sure.
loss, Naomi. I didn't know what was going to happen when I was 31. I thought that I was going to stay like I was at sort of 18 and that would be the rest of my life. I didn't, so there was no fear around going blind, but then there was that adaptation. I do think it was good actually when I had that 3 months, or that when I hit the bottom, I knew what I had to do to go up.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I was no longer going to, well, I did actually lose some more, but I knew I had to adapt, and that was the ground zero, I guess, at that stage for me. And I had to go on and learn how to do things in these new ways through, smelling, hearing, tasting, and touching.
Well, was there at any point like hope, like medically wise, that they could reverse or stop any further degeneration in your eyesight?
No,
Or just this is what's happening?
they don't really even, it's sort of undiagnosed at this stage, really, even
Right.
now. I don't think that would be a thing. I never put my hope towards getting my sight back. I always felt that it was better to put my hope into rehabilitating,
Right.
my energy into adapting. And I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. You talk about
Otherwise,
that grief.
yeah.
And that's, I think, all the different disabled people, or people with disabilities, sorry, that we talk to, that's a really common thread, except for people who were born with like congenital disabilities. Like we talked to a guy with cerebral palsy last week who it was all he knew was this type of body, and that being able to like offer what he could through the form he's got. He does stand-up comedy with slides as his background, and he's really fantastic. But my point is that grief is really and getting through that process of grief to a point where you're like, okay, here's where I am, and now I need to do something that's not sitting and being sad about my situation.
Yeah, because it can take a while to get to that point. So I didn't have seizures from birth. I started having seizures as about 30. And so you've got your life plan and your progression of everything you want to do, and bit by bit that was taken away. And so I don't know what person I would be without the seizures, because that's not my identity as such, but it's a very much controlling factor in life. And it's that getting used to, okay, this is me. What can I give now that I plan to? And it does take a bit of time to get to that state where you're okay with being this spaz, that's just what I'm like now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got blind friends who were blind from birth who wonder what the fuss is about.
Right, yeah.
Because they just
Stop
wonder why the
moaning.
world is not designed around them.
Yeah.
Because that's the way they were born, and they don't have that grief or that loss as much as someone who goes blind. And yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think my life, when I look at it, has been full of disruption.
Right.
It's totally, my career in particular has just been totally disrupted from 1831. When I was 35, my husband left. I've had melanoma, I've been hit by a bus, I've traveled, I've done all there's been just a constant
Well,
level of disruption that I don't know. It's like, God. And I think, imagine what I could have done if I hadn't have been disrupted. And then I
you
think,
might have, you may have
probably
had
not
a
as much
really,
as if I had been disrupted. So
yeah,
I
I was
try and
going to
look at
say,
disruption as a better thing. I was listening to Gilbert Anoka, the mental skills coach for the All Blacks, the other day, and
right.
he said about comfort ages you. And I thought,
Mm.
True.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we've got this thing about wanting to be comfortable and not wanting to be uncomfortable. But it's when we're uncomfortable and we get out of our comfort zone that we really grow and do cool things and different things and try new experiences. And it's like, yeah. So I think it's changing our mindset around disruption for me.
Yeah, well, I totally
Yeah,
agree with
that's
that.
definitely right.
I split with a partner and was kind of bored of not doing things because everything you're supposed to do things with a friend or with a couple. And so I started self-dating and putting myself in situations that I was like, you can't go to the cinema on your own. And like, sod it, I can do that. And so I started, this is how me and Steve met, is I started going to a comedy night. And would sit on my own in the corner. And then one night the comedians went, you know, come over here, come and sit with us. I was like, all right, I'll go and sit with the big kids. And then Steve said one night, when are you going to get on stage? And I was like, no, I can't do that. Microphones are terrifying. I can't get on stage. But then I thought, okay, that makes me really uncomfortable. And I wrote a set and went, actually, that might work. And I did it. And Steve hated me because it worked.
Yay.
And so from
Yeah.
that, yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a lot more confidence and get involved in film and theatre and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's because of the disruption of a relationship break.
Mm.
And yeah, it pushes you to give things a go, because what's the worst that can happen?
The two great times in my life, Naomi, when I look back now, is that I could say the two best things that happened was going blind and then being separated. They were game changers that
Yeah, yeah.
brought such opportunity to my life. And one of the things I talk about is when I went blind, I was walking around down the corridor at what's now known as Blind Low Vision NZ. And the recreation advisor came up to me and she said, Julie, we're taking a group of blind people away cross-country skiing. Would you like to come? And I thought, cross-country skiing, that sounds really dangerous. Something might happen to me, might fall over, a bunch of blind people. That's a bit random. And I politely declined. And I went home and I sat on the couch that night and I thought, you stupid woman, what kind of blind person are you going to make if you turn down opportunities that come your way? And I did so on fear and ignorance. I didn't even know what cross-country skiing was. So at that moment, I decided to turn my no into why not. And if anyone asked me to do anything, I would try it once. And if I didn't like it, I didn't have to do it again. But it's a response that's seen me do so many things, taken me out of my comfort zone, from do you want to learn to touch type? Do you want to learn Braille? To do you want to jump off the roof of the Forsyth Bar Stadium? And a whole host of things. So, listening to you guys just confirms how getting out of our comfort zone is such a good thing to do.
Totally. I love that idea.
I'm a big believer in the like that your most difficult circumstances give you the opportunity to find your greatest potential for growth and stuff. And it's when I'm like, when the pain really overwhelms me, I can be a real jerk and an asshole to my family, and because I'm just in this like pain reaction state. And I always, when I'm at, once I've kind of come through it a little bit, I'm like, okay, that's who I don't want to be. So I've now got the
Mm.
opportunity to be something different and to be, yeah, just to be something different. And similarly, like you're saying with the why nots, like I use yes and a lot. Like, yes, something horrible is happening to me, and now I need to do the dishes. And it's that stopping of, it's
Mm.
that not wanting something horrible to be true that stops most people who haven't had traumatic experiences from just getting on with it. And it's that acceptance, like that grief we talked about before, that's a really important part of the disability journey, I think.
Yeah, it's like I've said before about how I can do anything I like because I've fallen over in public and pissed myself,
Mm,
which is the worst thing. And so nothing compares to that. So I
mm.
have literally no self-confidence issues. I can go and do stuff, and what does it matter if it all goes wrong? So I've kind of got a free card just to do what I like. So,
Yeah.
that's the bonus. There is always a bonus. And one of my big things is finding a silver lining in any situation, as cheesy as that sounds, because there is always something. And it might not be a silver lining for me, but every time I have a seizure, say in public, which is awful, there is something from that, whether it's somebody else has had to call the emergency services for the first time in their life, or a kid has seen a seizure and knows what to do. There's something positive in everything. And if I struggle to find a positive, then it's like, oh, well, fuck it. What does it matter? So it's that letting go of shit, I
Yeah.
think is really important.
So which
I
kind of brings us on to your book, Julie, eh? Sorry, I
Mm.
interrupted you again.
No,
I'm
it's
very bad.
okay. No, it's good. Yes, why not? What a blind woman said to do. You want to referee a game of nude touch rugby and more? And that was a real why not moment when I
I
accepted that
I have so many
opportunity.
questions about the
You
nude
talked
touch
about
rugby.
nude before.
Well, first point was when they asked you to referee touch rugby,
Yes.
did you find out whether like they could have told you that and it wasn't, or told you it wasn't and it turned out it was? Like
Or that I had to be nude as well. I
yeah,
never
that's a
asked
good
that
point.
question because I didn't want to know the answer. They did an imaginary sprig test. It was held on the beach the first time. They did an imaginary sprig test, and they had no sprigs or boots. So, and they weren't very good at lifting their feet up. So I could tell they weren't wearing much. Let's just leave it at that.
I was going to say, how do you referee a game if you can't see?
Well, that's what I thought.
Hmm.
Yeah, what will my mother say? And how does a blind person referee a game of nude touch rugby? I had a sighted guide take me around the field who knew the rules of rugby. And he would whisper into my ear, yellow card, Julie, nude blacks, or red card, England, or whatever it was going to be. We had a fully clothed streaker who came onto the field. But fortunately, there was a naked policeman on duty that day, and he
That's
arrested the
fantastic.
fully clothed streaker. It was lots of fun.
I love that. It's totally flipping on its head.
And then when I gave the Nude Blacks, which was the New Zealand team, they were playing England because it was always played as a precursor or a curtain raiser to an All Blacks test when they were played in town. And so I gave a red card to one of the Nude Blacks. And of course, the crowd, who were predominantly on the New Zealand side, didn't like that. And they called out, "Boo, what are you, blind or something, ref?" Like, yes, I am. And the book has been written around going blind, sitting in that hospital room back in 1997, and then ending up on the sandy beach here in Dunedin, refereeing that game, and the story around learning to say why not and what it did for me in my life.
I love that.
Yeah,
Well, that the simplest ones are often the most powerful.
yeah, because people can remember them, can't you? And it's so easy to say no. You just do it so quickly without even thinking about it. And there are, when I thought about saying no to refereeing nude touch rugby, the two things that went in my mind were, what's my mother going to say, and how does a blind person referee a game of nude touch rugby? I didn't need to worry about any of that. That was getting stuck in the house. I just needed to say why not, and the rest unfolded. And as you all both know, that things have a way of working out.
Yeah. Do you, because of doing all that, do you ever get fed up of being called an inspiration? Because it could get tedious, I imagine. Does it put a pressure on you to be like strong and powerful, when I imagine sometimes you just want to tell everyone to fuck off and sit in the corner. But when you're an
Yes.
inspiration, you have to keep on doing these inspirational things.
I try not to put the pressure on myself, Naomi, but people do say it a lot. I struggle more with ableist comments that people say. I find the negative ones worse, actually. I find that it must be terrible not to be able to see. I don't know what I'd do if I went blind. You know, how can you cook, and all those things that are kind of rooted in limiting beliefs about what a blind person can do. I find them quite challenging.
Yeah.
But I do know what you mean. It's ableist to frame disability as either tragic or inspirational.
Yeah. And so, are there questions that you get really bored that is asked every single time?
Oh, how did you go blind?
Right. Yeah.
I don't mean on podcasts. I mean when I go out for dinner, or I get into a taxi, or you know, you think about how many times I might have been asked that. Can I pray for you?
Oh, yeah.
Because clearly I'm broken.
Because I guess, you know, people do, because it's something outside of their normal life, that you then become, and like you've been known as, that blind woman. And it's like, there's so much more to a person than that one thing. You know, you're not just your blindness. That's not all you've got to offer the world.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a person as well. That's right. A living, thinking, growing, emotional being.
Yeah.
That shares the planet with other people. I do sometimes get a bit tired of constantly kind of educating people. Yeah.
No, actually, I can do the dishes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So have you developed, one question I wanted to ask is, have you developed echolocation? Because that would be fucking awesome.
Oh,
I would like you to be a bat.
I have, but in a very basic form. I probably do it more than I realize, Naomi, actually. You know, a wall has a sound.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of like a dead sound. And then you can tell when you walk past that wall and then you're in an open space. And the most obvious thing that people would get is when wind comes through. You can feel the movement of air. There's no longer a wall, but there's air and space. So I think you do learn to develop that. I've never done it. I've never been trained or done that, but there's a great why not opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is you have superpowers already.
Of course. Like Wonder Woman.
Oh, in the olden days, Wonder Woman had an invisible jet, which no one can see.
Did.
Which kind of, you know, works with blind. There's a joke there somewhere. I just haven't.
Here's the ingredients for a joke. Make your own.
I think you're supposed to finish it off, Naomi.
You didn't tell me in advance, like Steve. Hand me the paper with the punchline.
Scripted. Clearly.
That sounds a lot like hard work, scripting a podcast.
Yeah.
Scripting a joke.
Well, especially for a shit joke.
Oh, I can write shit jokes all day long. I can
That
do
would be a good. Now, there's a good course: how to script a shit joke.
How to do a terrible stage show. Steve, you could write that.
Oh, I could write that all day long. I could write that for months. So with the books and stuff, and so both Naomi and I do kind of stagey. Naomi's gone off to do more film and theater because
I'm an actor.
I could tell.
Proper person.
Don't say you can tell. That's awful.
You look like a local. Say again.
We're listening to you. Just might not seem like it.
Yeah, Naomi, you have the vibe of a local theater person.
Oh no.
That's the meanest thing I think I've ever said to anyone. But no, we're going to talk about, in general, creativity. So like when you're finding that you can't do the things that you thought you used to be able to, or things that you think you should be able to do, that then oftentimes it's the creativity that kind of comes, I don't know, just kind of like bubbles up, where you've got, space that's normally held for all the other
Mm,
quote unquote important things. And then all of a sudden you now have this more spacious life than you did have, because you're less able to do the things. And then
yes.
you write a book or
Yeah.
do, I don't know, any one of the other things that you've
A
done.
bit like during the COVID lockdown,
Yeah.
because people
Yeah.
weren't going to work. They were like, oh, I want to paint or, do something different, because they've got the time and the space to do it. We just, like Steve and I, we just happen to have that all the time.
Yeah. I totally relate to that, because as you can imagine, when I went blind, so many things were removed from me.
Mm.
And that then introduced space to do other things. And one of the things I did was learn to touch type. And that moved me towards writing, which is something I'd never done. I'd got a D for third form English
Right.
and always carried that around. That was my baggage. And then I learnt to touch type, and I started to create files in Microsoft Word, which might sound really basic to lots of people. But for me, as a newly blind person, to be able to operate a computer with speech software and to learn to touch type, I all of a sudden had this blank canvas, and I could start writing things. And it's like, wow. And really, I did fill the space with writing. And that just grew and grew and grew until I started or wrote my first book called How to Make a Silver Lining, actually. Naomi, you were talking about
Right.
silver linings before, 8 keys for adapting to extraordinary change. And yeah, I found this thing that I really love doing. And of course, Braille was another thing that brought writing into my life. And it's interesting that when Louis Braille, who was the little French boy that invented the system of reading and writing at the age of 15 in 1824, when he did that, the community didn't think that blind people had anything of interest to say.
Right. Yeah.
So they had reading techniques for blind people to access written information, and it was very cumbersome, but they never thought that blind people would have anything interesting to say. And it's that kind of, wow, it's that writing and putting down your thoughts and sharing what you're thinking. It's giving you a voice,
Yeah. Yeah. With the Braille,
I
is
guess.
that?
And that's the one thing that I have done since I went blind that I probably never wouldn't have done before. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with the Braille, there's so many questions on that.
Mm.
Like, with, say, even with your typing, you say you type in Braille. Is that, like, do you have a special printer that prints it out? Or in the old days, was it a typewriter that would literally punch the Braille into the paper? Or
Yes, absolutely. I've got all of those, Naomi. You start by learning with what we call a Perkins Brailler, and that is like 6 keys that represent each dot in the Braille letters. And you learn which keys to push and punch. And so you start by writing letters and then reading those letters, of course. And
right.
nowadays we have digital Braille, we have electronic Braille displays that can convert written text into Braille, and also note takers that you can carry with you out when you go out and about and access the written word digitally. It's got like metal pins that pop up and
Oh,
change.
okay.
Yeah, you can. I've got an SD card that fits in the back of my Braille note taker, and I can put that into my laptop and download some files, anything from the internet, and then I can put it back in the Braille note taker and I can read that information.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
And of
cool, man.
course,
You're going.
access, there's so much information that we can access nowadays that we weren't able to before.
Your comment at the top about like technology, I think, is really, really on point, and that there's so many different accessibility things that, I mean, God, even for me, I did a funding application to take a show to the Dunedin Fringe, actually.
Oh, woo.
And they let me do it via, they had a section where you could apply to do it via Correo, so with interview, rather than having to write out like a big cumbersome funding application.
Yes, yeah.
Which for me is huge, because like to write a funding application and that much mental energy and focus and stuff takes a lot out of me. So to be able to just do it with a chat was amazing. And I managed to, I got $1,200 for my to take my
Yay.
show down to Dunedin.
Well
Have you
done.
done it?
Not yet. No, it's like March of next year.
Oh, cool.
Oh, so they
Okay.
paid you in advance.
Yeah.
Whee!
Well, but yeah, well, it's called The Unluckiest Magician, and it's kind of my show all about my journey and illness and health, and there's a moral at the end and all kinds of stuff. Still, I did it last year, and then I've taken the carburetor off the show and I'm retooling it all, so it's all very up in the air still. But yeah, technology is fantastic for being able to, yeah, just get those opportunities that everyone else really takes for granted.
Yeah, and that speaks to accessibility as well, Steve. You know, removing the barrier of completing a written application form for you, and you know, replacing it with something more accessible, which is a verbal interview, and that's great. Wouldn't it be great if the whole world responded in that way?
Yeah, rather than
It's leaning that way. I think it's definitely, you know, the world's got a long way to go, but it's considerations that are being made that didn't used to be made.
Yeah.
Didn't even used to even come into people's brains that, oh, maybe I should do this thing.
Yeah, you're not written off. You've still got something to offer. Good thing with them doing the theatre, like I'm in a show at the moment. I won't promote it because I'm not going to edit this till after it's done. But I've got a really awesome director who she makes sure there's things in place to try and mitigate the risk of me having a seizure. So generally I'm on the side of stage that's cooler, and they put an area that's soft and comfy in case I want to jump around a bit, and make sure there's water on hand and a fan on hand to keep me cool. And that's something they don't have to put in place for everybody, but they want me to be part of the show. And so they put those things in place, and it's almost to them that it's no big deal. It's like, well, that's what May needs to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And communicating your need is such a vital part of disability as well. It's easy to kind of get offended or humpty because, you know, that didn't happen. But if they don't know, you know, what your needs are,
yeah, I think that's still something.
Going to respond. Yeah,
I think I still struggle with that because I don't like to ask. Like, I don't want to be a burden. Like, oh, please make these special things for me, even though it's useful and helpful. I've got this sort of chip on my shoulder. It's more like a potato about asking for help and asking for assistance. And yeah, I think that's, even though I've been having seizures for so long, that's something I need to let go of.
Absolutely, because you know what's at the end of that, Naomi, if you do ask for help.
Yeah,
it's people coming together and around and surrounding you to support you, and as you say, there's little simple things that mean that you are able to be involved in the theatre and what you do. And actually, you know, I talked about how to make a silver lining, 8 keys for adapting to extraordinary change. The first key I identified in adapting to my extraordinary change was ask for help.
Yeah, and that can be a big thing.
Yeah,
to learn that. Like, I personally have never had any negative reaction to asking for help.
Yeah, there you go.
Why have I got an issue with
it?
Because you're mental.
How dare you say that to a full-time spaz?
There's a lot of resource at the end of asking for help, Naomi.
Well, it's like it's that thing of like the people in general, you know, not going to say everyone, because there are some people who are legitimately horrible arseholes out there, but most people want to help. Most people want to be nice.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes that, like, I think especially when you're maybe starting your disability journey or whatever, that like having someone see that and want to be nice to you can almost be worse than just coping. Like being seen in that way can feel almost confronting in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's something I've found is having seizures in public is people kind of like the opportunity to be the hero. Like not in a bad way, that's in a really positive way. Like they see somebody who needs help and it's like, I can do that. I can help this person, and they can go home and go, guess what I did today? And sometimes that's the only silver lining I found, is that I gave somebody a good story. But most people want to, it's a really good thing. They want to help. And I've only had, a couple of occasions where it's not been ideal, but there was still a silver lining. But I've never had anything terrible happen. It might be different in a big city as opposed to Nelson. But yeah, people do want to help. And people don't see you as less than. I think that's more my own judgment of myself.
I shouldn't need to ask for help. I should be able to do this by myself, because I should be able to pull myself up by my bootstraps.
Yes. Yeah. And just stop having seizures. Just get over it. Grow up.
I think if you're clear, then people are clear about what they need to do as well. I think I've found that's really important. If you say, would you mind reading me the menu, please? Or whatever it is that you need, then people will often respond in kind.
Yeah, because I guess, not everybody realizes it might be a simple thing that helps. Like with me, like say with the theatre, is a spray bottle of water, anti-spaz spray, as I call it. So the bottle of water and a fan and a comfy space to sit can be like the difference between me being able to take part or not. And it's a really simple thing.
I thought that spray bottle was to stop you getting up on the table.
Get off the furniture.
The slip spray.
Like calling it anti-spaz spray, like the one that I've got at home, it's got a label on it that says that. And when I say that to people who don't particularly know me that well or don't know the humor, even though I'm the one that said it, people freeze. And they're like, oh, am I allowed to respond to that? And it's like, it is what it is. It actually is that. But yeah, I do like seeing people's reactions, that uncomfortable reaction to it all.
Yeah, sometimes I like that when I'm on a plane and people don't realize that I'm blind, and I'll hop up and let them sit in, and then I think, how long will it take before I reveal the sometimes I like to play a bit of a game, but wait till the air hostess will come up and say, can I do that? Can I put this lid on? And they're kind of thinking, what is this all about?
And then people will start second guessing, like, oh, have you seen that movie? Or look at the view out the window. Because I've had people go, like, they've used the words fit, like they've literally been to the gym and they're feeling fit. And then they've apologized for using that word. And I'm like, get over it. Those sort of things aren't offensive. Like if somebody says to you, have you seen a movie or have you read that book? Like you have.
Absolutely.
It may have
been
fine.
I've read it with my ears, not with my eyes.
Exactly. It's still a book.
We're just getting almost towards the end. There's just one thing that have people mentioned Richard Turner to you? Is that a name that rings a bell?
No.
So Richard Turner, because I work as a magician, is my main kind of day job. And so Richard Turner is a blind, what's called a card mechanic. So he specializes in cheating at poker. And
I've seen that guy. He's amazing.
I've seen him live, and you'll sit there and there'll be 5 people and he's like, okay, who do you want to win? You say number 3, and then he'll deal out a hand, and completely invisibly number 3 has the winning hand every time.
Wow. His manipulation of cards, like shuffling and everything, is fantastic.
He never stops shuffling cards, and he can actually feel the print on the cards, and that's one of the ways that he manipulates them around.
He's got a documentary on Netflix, is that right?
Yeah, it's called Dealt, which you should definitely check out. And
look him up.
Hey,
from one really blind woman to another blind man.
Well, one of the things that I found really interesting about the documentary is that it was, as well as it being just, interesting, a blind guy who can do, what's in effect card magic. the documentary really dealt with his son going off to college. And so his son had previously done a lot of the stuff, like if he goes to a convention, he would set up the table and find the stuff. And it was about him really coming to terms with his blindness decades after it had become a fact, because he'd been using these other support systems, and now he was having to, like you're saying, use his phone, learn to use speech software, and do all these things that he was just kind of getting around instead of like learning, I don't know, the proper way, I guess you could say, to like deal with it himself, you know?
Yeah, well, that's a big lesson, isn't it?
But yeah, it was a good movie. He's fantastic, amazing
Okay.
mind magician. I just wanted to be like, oh, here's a thing that you
Thank you.
may or may not have seen.
Yeah, because I mean, what I liked about that is that either like it's people watch it and go, "Oh, he's amazing for a blind person."
Yeah.
It's like he's amazing
Yeah.
regardless. You know,
He's
Exactly.
amazing for
very
anyone.
good.
They're like that. The type of card stuff that he does is the hardest to do. Full stop. The end. Especially because if you do it wrong, someone will chop off your hands.
Right. Okay.
Like, yeah, he used to hang with some like tough guy characters back in the day, and he tells all these crazy stories of like when there was a guy following him around that was like, hey, do you want $2 million to go gamble with? And would like show up 3 seats behind him on an airplane. But he always would say no, because like once you get up to that kind of money, as soon as the game's over, you're dead.
Yeah.
Because it's too
Yeah.
big of a number
see,
for
now you're
people to mess around with.
Going back to what Naomi was talking about and not being able to see what's going on around you, you're starting to creep me out, Steve.
Well, maybe if you're lucky, someone will lurk around trying to give you $2 million.
Oh, no, but then they'll kill me.
Oh.
So at the start, you said you weren't paranoid, and with the
Yeah,
podcast,
now I am. Thanks to Steve, I am.
Well, it's why not? Why not take the $2 million? Maybe you'll be able to defeat him in hand-to-hand combat, and then you'll like be safe forever. Why not?
Oh. When will this end?
I think about now, actually. It is roughly the end of the podcast.
Oh, this has been
thank you
super
so
fun.
much. So remind us about your websites and your plugs and where people can find you and stuff.
My website is thatblindwoman.co.nz. My email address is julie@thatblindwoman.co.nz. On there you will find my books, Why Not? What a Blind Woman Said to Do You Want to Referee a Game of Nude Touch Rugby and more, and Wonderlust, a true life fairy tale of Julie, Jane and Ronald visiting the 7 wonders of the world.
Brilliant.
Thank you both.
Brilliant. It's been really good talking with you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Julie.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I'll do it again. Why not?
Awesome.
Yay. Thank you guys for listening. It's been Steve and Nay, and we'll see you guys next time.